Dead ships don't breathe. That's the first thing they teach you in the Concorde salvage yards. But the World Render was breathing. I could feel it through the soles of my boots, standing on a hull older than human civilization. A slow, deep hum, like something sleeping, like something waiting. The graveyard fleet of the Tassari Concorde stretched out around me in the dark. 10,000 dead warships hanging in orbit around a dying star. And the officers in their clean white uniforms were laughing at me. That wreck is dead. Human, they said. Touch it and you'll join it. They were half right. The weld line on Bulkhead 9 was the first thing I noticed. Nobody else noticed it. 900 alien engineers had crawled over this ship for 3 centuries, and not one of them had run a bare hand along that seam. It was cold, colder than the rest of the hull. Cold like a scar that never healed right. I pressed my palm flat against it and felt the hum change. Just a little. Just enough. My name is Cole Brannick, 41 years old. 22 of them spent elbow deep in the guts of ships nobody else wanted. I'm not a Marine. I'm not a scientist. I fix things. On Earth, that makes you a tradesman. Out here, in the territory of the Tassari Concorde, it makes you a joke. You want to understand the Concorde. You picture a peacock, 9 feet tall, hollow bones, feathers like spun glass, a brain wired for mathematics that would make a supercomputer blush. They are beautiful and they know it. They built the largest empire this arm of the galaxy has ever seen. And they keep humans around for one reason. Somebody has to crawl into the radioactive crawl spaces. Somebody has to hold the hot end of the torch. Somebody has to bleed. They call us the callous species. They mean it as an insult. High Engineer Vextalion was the worst of them. He ran Graveyard Station Theta like a temple, and the World Render was his altar. 3 kilometers of matte black hull, built by a species that vanished 100,000 years ago. The Concorde found it drifting and spent 3 centuries trying to wake it up. They mapped every corridor. They translated every glyph. They prayed to it, I think, in their own cold way. And they never got so much as a flicker from its reactor. Vex declared it dead, sealed it, made it a shrine, and then a human dockhand with grease under his fingernails walked up to the sacred hull and slapped it with an open palm. You should have heard the silence. 400 Concorde officers on that observation deck, and not one of them breathed. Slapping a machine is a sacred human ritual. Nobody tells you that. We do it because vibration tells the truth. A healthy machine rings. A sick one thuds. The World Render didn't thud. It hummed back. I felt it in my teeth. What do you think you're doing? Vex's voice came down from the command platform, like a blade being drawn. His crest feathers were fully flared. In Tassari body language, that's rage. In my experience, it's also fear dressed up pretty. Checking your corpse, I said. It's got a pulse. The laughter started at the back of the deck. It rolled forward like a wave. A pulse, Vex repeated. 3 centuries of diagnostic scans. 900 certified engineers. The finest minds of 11 species. And the human says it has a pulse. He stepped down from the platform. He was taller than me. They're all taller than us. He put his face close to mine, and his translator made his voice come out flat and metallic. Listen carefully, Salvage 8. The Concorde has issued a reclamation order. This star is dying. In 60 days it will begin to shed its outer shell, and everything in this yard will burn. We are stripping the fleet for parts and abandoning the graveyard. The World Render cannot be moved. Its reactor is cold. Its drives are cold. Its heart has not beat since before your species discovered fire. It is dead. He paused. But the Concorde is generous. You have 20 days to strip its hull plating like the rest of the vermin crews. Do that, and perhaps we'll let your little tug stay docked. Touch anything else, and I'll have you spaced for desecration. You ever notice how arrogant people always give you a deadline? Like the universe cares about their calendar. 60 days until the star sheds. 20 days of permission. The math was simple. The math was also wrong, and I was the only one who knew why. I went back to my tug, the Bessie. 200 tons of patched plate, salvaged engines, and bad decisions. She's ugly. She leaks. She's mine. My co-pilot, if you can call a 90-pound stray dog a co-pilot, was asleep on the navigation console. I call him Wrench. He earned the name. Long story. I pulled up everything the Concorde had on the World Render. 3 centuries of reports. I read them for 2 days straight. And you know what I found? Nothing. Not nothing as in empty files. Nothing as in 900 engineers, who all made the same assumption. They assumed the ship was broken. Think about that. 100,000-year-old warship, sitting in a graveyard, wrapped around a reactor that won't light. Every mind in the Concorde looked at it and saw a corpse. But I fix garbage for a living, and garbage taught me something that all their mathematics never did. Sometimes a machine isn't broken. Sometimes it's just waiting for the right conditions. Sometimes it's asleep on purpose. The cold weld on bulkhead 9, the hum under my boots, the reactor that wouldn't light. Put them together, and what do you get? You get a ship that shut itself down. On purpose. Deliberately. The World Render wasn't dead. It was hiding. And that scared me more than anything Vex could have said. Because you only hide from something worse than you. Day 3, I went back to the hull. Vex had guards posted. Tassari Marines with pulse lances and mirrored visors. Their orders were simple. The human can strip plate. The human touches nothing else. So I stripped plate. For 6 hours. That's the thing about being human. We can do boring. Other species medicate themselves against monotony. We lean into it. We hum. We let our hands work and our minds wander. 6 hours of cutting plate, and my hands learned more about that hull than 3 centuries of scans ever did. The plate wasn't armor. It was bandage. Layered patch over layered patch. Thousands of them, welded one on top of another over the same wound. Something had hit the ship. Something big. And whatever crew had survived had spent years, maybe decades, patching that wound while the ship bled out around them. And under the last patch, I found the glyph the Concorde translators had given up on. It wasn't a word. It was a diagram, a circle with a crack in it, and an arrow pointing into the crack, and a second circle drawn inside the first. I'm not a linguist, but I am a welder, and any welder alive will tell you what that diagram says. It says, the shell is broken, feed the crack, and the core will close it. The reactor wasn't cold because it was dead. It was cold because it was starving. The ship had cut its own power and gone dormant, rather than let its wound tear it apart. It was waiting for someone to feed it, to push energy into the breach, so its core could heal the shell. 900 engineers had scanned that reactor and reported zero output. Not one of them ever asked the obvious question. Ask it now. What happens to an engine that's been off for 100,000 years? Nothing. Nothing at all. Engines don't die of old age. They die of neglect. And this one had been waiting, patient as stone, for someone stubborn enough to feed it. I spent day 4 doing the math on Bessie's hood, while Wrench watched me with that disappointed-look dogs invented long before humans ever met aliens. To wake the World Render, I needed to push energy into the breach. Not a trickle, a flood. More power than my tug could make in a year. More power than a whole salvage fleet could make. The Concorde could have done it, easy, with their grid stations. But the Concorde had declared the ship dead. And in the Concorde, the word of a high engineer is closer to law than physics is. There's an old saying in the yards, if you can't get more power, get closer to it. I looked up through the viewport at the star, the dying star, the one that was going to shed its shell in 60 days and cook this entire graveyard down to slag. A star is the biggest engine there is. And it was right there. I almost laughed. Wrench lifted his head and looked at me like I'd finally said something intelligent. Nobody flies into a dying star. Every species in the galaxy knows that. The radiation kills you before the heat does, and the heat kills you before the light does. Ships melt. Sensors burn. The Concorde's finest warships won't go closer than 4 stellar radii. It's not a rule. It's just obvious. But obvious is where humans live. See, here's what the peacocks never understood about us. We evolved chasing antelope across the Serengeti in the noon sun. We're the only species in the Concorde that sweats. They pant, they flutter, they bask. They shut down when it gets hot. We drip water through our skin and keep walking. Our ships are built the same way. Crude, heavy, ugly, and insulated like the inside of a kiln. Because human engineers grew up assuming everything eventually gets hot and somebody has to keep working anyway. The Bessie couldn't survive the star, but the World Render could. I could feel it. A ship built to fight near a 100,000-year-old war doesn't care about a little stellar weather. The trick was getting close enough to feed it. I didn't need to fly into the star. I needed to fly into its breath, close enough to catch the energy of the shedding and shove it down the Worldrender's broken throat. I worked out the approach vector over 3 sleepless nights. It was insane. It was beautiful. It was, as far as I could tell, the only play on the board. Day 7, I took it to Vex. I want to say he listened. He didn't. I stood in his temple of a control room, under the vaulted ceiling, in front of 200 officers, and I laid out the whole plan on the main display. The breach, the glyph, the reactor, the approach, the numbers. For about 10 seconds, nobody spoke. Then Vex laughed. It wasn't a big laugh. It was worse. It was small and tired. The laugh of a man who has already decided you are furniture. The human wants to fly the dead god into the burning heart of heaven, he said, so the dead god can drink the fire. He turned to his officers. This is why we keep them. For entertainment. The room laughed with him. 200 throats, all in harmony. They laughed at my grease-stained jacket. They laughed at my math. One of them, a junior engineer with silver crest feathers, said the words I've heard my whole life in a dozen accents. Stick to the crawl spaces, human. Leave the thinking to the thinking species. I let them finish. That's another human trick. We let you finish. Then I said the only thing worth saying. Then strip your plates and run, I said. The star doesn't care about your decree. When it sheds, this yard burns, and every warship you're so proud of becomes a memory. That ship is the only thing in this graveyard that can survive what's coming. Wake it, and you can ride it out of here. Leave it sleeping, and you'll be explaining to your Concorde why you turned the graveyard fleet into vapor. The laughter died, not because they believed me, because for 1 second, they all did the math. Vex leaned close again. His voice dropped. If you approach that ship's reactor with anything larger than a cutting torch, I will personally vent you into space. That is not a regulation, human. That is a promise. 19 days left. 18. 17. I stripped plate like a good little vermin. And every night, in the dark, I worked on the real plan. Because here's the thing about being the callous species. We're used to rules that were written to keep us in. The crawl spaces. And we've had 200 years of practice deciding which rules to keep. I couldn't move the Worldrender. I couldn't power the Worldrender. But I didn't need to. The star was going to shed its outer shell in 53 days. The Concorde's own sensor said so. And the first breath of that shedding, the precursor flare, would hit the graveyard in about 3 weeks. A wave of radiation and charged plasma strong enough to fry every unshielded circuit in the yard. The Concorde called it the first cough. They planned to be gone before it happened. I planned to be holding a cup. All I needed was a way to channel that flare into the breach. A lightning rod 3 kilometers long. And I'd been staring at one for a week. The graveyard's central pylon. The docking spine of the whole station. 6 kilometers of superconductive alloy, anchoring 10,000 dead ships. The Concorde was going to abandon it anyway. I wasn't going to steal it, exactly. I was going to borrow it, re-aim it, turn the entire docking spine into a needle pointed at the wound in the Worldrender's side. So when the star coughed, the cough would go where I wanted it. It would take welding, a lot of welding, in places no one was watching. So that's what I did. Every night, while the yard slept, a human in a patched suit crawled along the pylon with a torch and a thermos of terrible coffee, cutting old anchor locks and reseating conductor rings, 1 meter at a time. 16 nights, 400 meters, burns on my hands that healed and burned again. You want to know the real human superpower? It isn't sweating. It isn't endurance. It's that we will do the tedious, painful, boring thing 10,000 times in a row. For reward we might not live to see. Persistence isn't a trait. It's a habit. And the galaxy has no idea how dangerous a habit can be. Day 20, the Concorde pulled out. You should have seen it. 11 species, thousands of ships, an empire on the move. They stripped the yard's grid stations, loaded their relics, and formed up into a migration column 40 light minutes long. It was beautiful, in the way a forest fire is beautiful. Vex came to see me one last time. He found me on the pylon, halfway through a weld, hanging over 1,000,000 kilometers of nothing. Last chance, salvage 8, he said through the suit channel. There's a berth for your tug on the carrier Ilthani. Take it. The first cough comes in 9 days. Whatever madness you've been welding out here will be ash with the rest of it. I killed the torch and looked at him. A 9-foot peacock in a vacuum suit worth more than my ship, floating in the dark, offering me my life. Take the berth, he said again, and there was something in his voice I hadn't heard before. It took me a second to place it. Pity. Vex, I said. When this is over, remind me to show you what the hum means. He left. They all left. By day 21, the graveyard was empty. 10,000 dead ships, 1 dying star, 1 dog, and me. I want to tell you I felt fear. I did. But it was the good kind. The kind that sharpens you. There's an old human saying, older than spaceflight. When you're going through hell, keep going. Day 22. I moved the Bessie into the Worldrender's hangar mouth. The big ship's doors had been sealed for 3 centuries. They opened for me in 4 minutes. I want you to understand how strange that was. I didn't hack anything. I didn't force anything. I found the manual release, because there's always a manual release. That's rule 1 of the trades. The builders always hide a handle for the poor soul who has to fix it when the power dies. And I pulled it, and 300 tons of ancient door rolled aside, like it had been oiled yesterday, like it wanted to open. Inside, the Worldrender smelled like nothing. That's the detail that stays with me. Dead ships stink of rot, of leaked coolant, of old death. This one smelled like a cold stove. Clean. Waiting. The corridors were huge, built for something bigger than us, bigger than the Tassari. Wrench didn't like it. He stayed close to my leg the whole way in, growling at shadows. Smart dog. I spent 6 days learning the ship's body, the way you learn a patient's body. Hands on bulkheads, ear against deck plates. And the more I touched, the more the hum answered. It followed me. I swear it. I'd weld a conductor link into the breach channel, and the hum would swell, just for a moment, like a sleeper sighing. On day 25, I found the crew. I wasn't looking for them. I was tracing the breach channel through a lower deck when the corridor opened into a chamber the size of a docking bay, and the beam of my helmet lamp fell across rows. Rows and rows. At first I thought they were machinery. Then I got closer, and the beam caught the curve of her face. They were seated in cradles, hundreds of them, arranged in perfect ranks like a theater audience, waiting for a show that ran 100,000 years late. Tall. Too many joints in the arms. Skin like gray stone. Dried hard as leather by 100 millennia of vacuum. The builders. The crew of the Worldrender, sitting at their stations, exactly where they died. There was no battle damage in that chamber. No scorch marks. No breached bulkheads. Whatever killed them hadn't come through the hull. It had come through them, all at once, mid-shift, and they had died at their posts without ever leaving them. I stood there a long time. You don't touch a thing like that. You just stand there and let it be heavy. And here's the detail that I haven't told anyone. The one I still think about at night. The last cradle in the last row was empty. Not unused. Empty. The harness was unlatched. On the console in front of it, someone had scratched a mark with a tool. Not a glyph, not a word. A handprint, pressed into the soft metal with deliberate force, fingers splayed. One survivor, one crew member who walked off this ship after everyone else died, scratched "I was here" into the console, and left the door sealed, and the ship asleep, and the hum running low for 100,000 years. Maybe they went for help that never came. Maybe they went to warn somebody. Or maybe. And this is the thought that followed me back to the cradle chamber every night after. Maybe they went to face whatever it was that could kill a crew of giants without ever touching their ship. I pressed my palm into that ancient handprint. It was bigger than mine, but not by as much as you'd think. I don't know what you were running from, I told the empty cradle, but nobody else is dying at their post on my watch. The hum under the deck answered. Low, almost gentle. Wrench, who had refused to enter that chamber and had waited in the corridor whining, finally crept in and sat on my boot. And that, more than anything, is what got me back to work. Because a dog sitting on your foot means the universe isn't done with you yet. I mapped the wound all the way to its heart. The breach ran 800 meters, from that cold seam on bulkhead 9 down to the reactor throat. The builders had lined it with a conductor I'd never seen before. Not metal. Something grown. Something that drank energy and held it. The Concorde scans had read it as inert crystal. Dead weight. It wasn't dead. It was thirsty. Day 28. 2 days before the first cough. I finished the last link between the pylon needle and the breech channel. My hands were ruined. Burns across both palms. A cracked rib from a slipped tether. 4 hours of sleep in 3 days. I sat down in what had to be the command cradle, a seat built for something with too many arms, in a chamber the size of a cathedral, and I put my hands flat on the cold armrests, and I did the stupidest, most human thing you can imagine. I talked to it. I know you're awake in there, I said. I know you've been waiting. I don't know what hurt you. I don't know what you're hiding from. But in 2 days, this whole sky is going to burn, and everyone who called you a corpse is going to be 1 billion kilometers away. And it's just you and me, and a star that's about to cough up more fire than either of us can hold. So here's the deal. You drink what I feed you. You close your wound. You wake up, and then you get us both out of here. The hum didn't change, but Wrench stopped growling. He lay down at the base of the cradle and put his head on his paws, calm as Sunday. Dogs know. Day 30 came up like a held breath. The star filled half the sky now, swollen and wrong. Its surface crawling with loops of fire the size of worlds. The Concorde's remote buoys were screaming warnings into empty space. Precursor flare in 6 hours. 4, 2. I strapped into the cradle, Wrench into his harness, and I waited, watching the instruments I'd bolted together from scrap, listening to the hum of a 100,000-year-old giant. And outside, at the end of 6 kilometers of stolen pylon, a needle pointed at the wound. And beyond it, the star. At 4:17 station time, the star coughed. I don't have words for what it looked like. There aren't any. A wave of light and fury. The skin of a sun thrown off like a coat, rolling over the graveyard. It hit the outer hulks first. Ships that had survived 1,000 battles came apart like paper in a bonfire. The light came through the blast shutters like needles. The radiation alarms didn't sound. There was no point. We were past alarms. The wave hit the pylon, and the pylon sang. 6 kilometers of superconductive spine took the breath of a dying star and screamed it down the needle, into the breach, into the wound, into the throat of the sleeping giant. Every light in the cathedral chamber blew at once. The deck kicked like a living thing. Somewhere below me, 800 meters of grown crystal drank a river of fire and glowed white from the inside. And the hum I'd been chasing for 30 days. The hum rose up through the deck, through the cradle, through my bones, and became a voice. Not words, never words. A chord, a single, vast, 3-kilometer chord, like the biggest bell in the universe, remembering how to ring. The world render opened its eyes. Every screen I hadn't blown was alive, not with Concorde glyphs, with something older, maps of stars that no longer exist, trajectories drawn in fire, and through it all, that chord, rising and falling like breathing. The ship was awake. It was also dying. Feeding the breach had closed the wound. The shell was sealing. I could see it on the hull cams. Molten seams knitting themselves shut like a scab forming in fast forward. But the reactor was a 100,000-year-old heart that had just swallowed a river. It was running hot, running rough, misfiring. You don't need to be an engineer of 11 species to know the sound of an engine running rough. You need to be a mechanic. The timing was off. The great reactor was drawing power in surges. Gulp and choke. Gulp and choke. And every choke shuttered the whole 3 kilometers of hull like a cough in a chest. Left alone, it would tear itself apart inside an hour. There was no control interface. No throttle. No lever mark fix me. Whatever crew this ship was built for had controlled it with minds or limbs I didn't have. But the chord was there. The hum. It rose when the reactor gulped and cracked when it choked. The ship was telling me where it hurt, the only language we had, so I flew by ear. I want you to sit with that for a second. 900 certified engineers needed a neural interface, and 3 centuries to fail to wake this ship. A dockhand from Earth's salvage yards flew it by listening to it hum and laying his burned hands on the cradle, nudging power down one channel, and then another, humming back at it. Yes. Literally humming, tunelessly, the way you hum to a nervous animal, until the gulp and choke smoothed out into something steady. Sweat was running off me in ropes. The chamber was 50 degrees and climbing. A Tassari would have been unconscious. A Vorath would have been dead. I dripped on the sacred armrests and kept my hands flat and kept humming. And the world render steady. And the cough became a purr. And outside, the second wave of the shedding was already building on the star's horizon. Time to go. Except there was nowhere to go. The Concorde had taken the grid stations. The nearest safe harbor was 60 light minutes away. And the world render's drives. I found this out as I woke them, one by one, like lighting candles in a cathedral, were built for a physics I barely understood. They didn't push. They pulled. They grabbed the fabric of space and hauled. And they were aimed, every one of them, at an NAV anchor that had burned out 100 millennia ago. The ship could move. It just couldn't steer. I did what humans do. I improvised. The graveyard was burning. 10,000 dead hulks, each one a mass of metal the size of a city, each one about to become shrapnel. And I had 3 kilometers of awake warship that could pull on space itself, but couldn't aim. So I aimed it the way you'd aim anything with no steering. I chose what to pull against. Piece by piece, surge by surge, I had the world render grab the burning hulks around us. The biggest ones, the ones with the most mass. Use them like handholds on a cliff face. Pull left, brace. Pull right, brace. A 3-kilometer warship, rock climbing out of a burning graveyard on the corpses of its dead cousins, while a dying star threw its skin at us, while a dog slept through all of it, because dogs trust the hands that feed them. It took 4 hours. 4 hours of burned hands and broken instruments and sheer, stupid, human stubbornness. And then the graveyard fell away behind us, and the star's fury fell away with it, and the world render slid out into clean, cold, quiet space, purring like the biggest, oldest cat in the universe. I sat in that cradle for a long time. Then I laughed. You ever laugh so hard it scares you? Wrench barked at me. Fair. Now, here's where the story turns. Because the Concorde migration column was 40 light minutes long, and it was slow, and it was strung out in a line like beads on a string. And the star wasn't done. The third shedding, the big one, the one the Concorde's own models said would reach further than anyone wanted to admit, was already building. And the Concorde had a problem. Their column was too long. Their fastest ships were at the front. Their slowest, the colony arcs, the ones full of families, were at the back. And the back of the column was still inside the kill zone. I watched it on the world render's ancient sensors, watching a 100,000-year-old machine track the math I'd already done in my head. The third wave was going to catch the last 40 ships, including the carrier Ilthani, including every officer who'd laughed, including Vex. I didn't decide anything. That's the part one needs you to understand. There was no speech in my head, no dramatic moment. My hands were already moving. You don't let people burn. That's the whole rule. The only one that matters. The world render could pull on space. It couldn't steer fine, but it didn't need to steer fine. It needed to do one impossible thing. It needed to get between a star and 40 ships and eat the wave. 3 kilometers of hull built by giants, patched by ghosts, woken by a welder. I brought the world render around in a long, groaning arc, and I drove it straight into the path of the third shedding. And I parked it there, like a wall. The wave hit us at 11:52 station time. It hit the hull that had just healed itself with the breath of a star, and the hull drank it, fed on it. I felt the cord swell until my bones rang with it. Felt the ship plant itself in the fire, like a bull lowering its head. And on the other side of that wall of fire, 40 ships full of the proudest species in the galaxy flew on, untouched, and never even knew what stood between them and the dark. When it was over, I opened a channel to the Ilthani. It took them a long time to answer. When the screen resolved, Vex was standing on his command deck, and behind him, 200 officers were staring at their own external feeds. At me, at the ship, at the impossible thing sitting between them and a burning star. His crest feathers were flat, all of them, on every officer on that deck. In Tassari body language, a flattened crest means submission. I don't think they even knew they were doing it. Hi, engineer, I said. My voice was ruined. 2 weeks of welding smoke and 1 hour of screaming at a dying sun. You'll be pleased to know the corpse had a pulse. Nobody laughed. Nobody said a word. Vex looked at me for a long moment, and then slowly, on the command deck of the carrier Ilthani, in front of 11 species and the full record of Concord history, the high engineer of Graveyard Station Theta went down on one knee. "You told us it was dead," I said. "It was never dead. It was waiting for someone to feed it. Everything is. That's the thing the Concord never learned, with all its mathematics. Machines, people, whole species. Nothing is ever really gone as long as somebody stubborn is still willing to put their hands on it. They made me an offer after. The Concord always makes offers. They wanted the world rendered. They wanted me in it. Fleet Warden, they said. First human to hold Concord rank. I told them I'd think about it. Then I set a course for the next salvage yard, because the Bessie was still docked in the hangar. Wrench was hungry, and a well doesn't care what titles you hold. But sometimes, when the hum shifts in the deck plates, I put my hand flat on the bulkhead, and I hum back. If this story of one stubborn mechanic and the ship that refused to die fired you up, hit that like button, smash subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Share this video with your fellow sci-fi fans, especially the one who always says the machine's not broken, it's just waiting. Drop a comment below. What would you have done? Taken the safe berth on the Ilthani, or stayed in the graveyard with the dead god? Until next time, keep your torch hot, your hand steady, and never trust anyone who calls something dead without touching it first. See you in the stars.